Welcome everybody to the webinar. Today's webinar is 3 things you need to know about the ASME code updates. And we'll be going over changes of the code updates for elevator emergency communications. I'm Dave Mann. I'm the VP of Technology here at Kings 3. That puts me responsible for the whole technology group. That's the IT department, software development, and product development. I'll also introduce Calvin Lindy. He is the project manager at Mann Elevator. And Don, if you want to introduce yourself.
I'm Don Holloway. I am 20 years plus in the elevator business. I am Kings 3's field service manager as well as elevator program manager. I'm also have been an elevator mechanic, elevator inspector, consultant throughout the years. I carry my qualified elevator inspector's license, as well as sit on the code committee for the electrical code committee for ASME, and carry about 20 plus licenses across the country.
ASME, who are they? That's the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. They're founded in 1880. They are a globally recognized code source, a very active code writing organization for a broad range of things. Today, we're concentrating on the elevator emergency code that they do, and we're going to describe some of the changes in the 2019 code.
ASME, the current requirements. You've got to have a hands-free device. You've got to have a two-way communication between elevator and authorized personnel. On-site communication for elevators over 60 feet of travel. Answer 24/7 by live authorized personnel only. No automated answering. Location identification on demand with authorized personnel without voice communication. Automatic answer when calling into the elevator. Automatically redirect if no answer on site. Off-site communication cannot interfere with on-site communication. Local telephone line status monitoring. This next section here is the code, which is the 2.27.1.1.1. What this setup is, this gives you information on what the current code is compliant with. In the blue, you're going to notice we have the changes. The first one to be a communication means between the car and location, staff or authorized personnel who can take appropriate action shall be provided. And the point 3 of that section, the communication means within the car shall comply with the following compliance. As you can see, there's been additions with the ADAAG as well as the ADA/ABAAG. Part B of this, the push button to actuate the two-way communication means shall be provided in or adjacent to the card panel. The push button shall be visible and permanent identification by the phone. That's what we're currently used to. We have that right now. The addition is the communication means shall be initiated when push button is actuated. What does this mean? The person answering the phone needs to be able to take appropriate action. The call button must initiate a call. Rocket science, right? No, it's just a method of writing codes. Think ridiculous warning labels on every easy to use product that you have. On the same panel, the push button and message shall be displayed. That is activated by authorized personnel to acknowledge that if communications are established, the message shall be permitted to be extinguished where necessary to display a new message when the communications are terminated. Also in D, on the same panel as the phone push button, messages shall be displayed which permit authorized personnel to communicate with and obtain responses from trapped passengers, including passengers who cannot verbally communicate and cannot hear. On the same panel as the phone, a push button, on the same panel as the phone push button, a message shall be displayed that is activated by authorized personnel to indicate when help is on the way. The message shall continue to be displayed until a message is displayed or the communication is terminated. What does this mean? Elevator must have the ability for authorized personnel to send messages to as well as receive responses from trapped passengers. This includes passengers that cannot speak or hear. Just another quick note on this one is keeping in mind that you have 2 words that are very important, being authorized personnel and emergency personnel. That will be the separation between outside authorized personnel that you speak to and emergency personnel on site. It'll be clarified more as we go along. A means to display video to observe passengers at any location on the car floor to authorized personnel for entrapment. Assessments shall be provided. What does this mean? Elevator must have video capabilities for the authorized personnel to view the entire floor of the cab. The 2.27.1.1.4, the added on this one, this is the section that is concerning emergency personnel. That would be any elevator with a rise above 60 foot. So where an elevator rises above 18 meters, 60 feet or more, two-way communications, voice communication means within the building, accessible to emergency personnel shall be provided and comply with the following requirements. The communication shall be disconnected only when emergency personnel outside the car terminates the call or a timed termination occurs. A timed termination can be the communication means in the elevator with the ability to extend the call by emergency personnel. It is permitted if voice notification is sent by the communication means to emergency personnel. A minimum of 3 minutes after the communication has been established. Upon notification, emergency personnel shall have the ability to extend the call automatically. Disconnection shall be permitted if the means of extending are not enacted within 20 seconds of the voice notification. Once the communication has been established, a message shall be displayed on the same panel as the phone push button, and that's activated for the emergency personnel to indicate that help is on site. The message shall be permitted to be extinguished where necessary to display a message or when the communications are terminated. Why is this important? Currently, many elevators have a light to indicate help is on the way. The indicator light will provide the clarity and additional reassurance to the entrapped passengers. So when you're standing in a car and you press the button, you notice it'll flash and it says help is on the way. Now we're given more clarification by the code that tells when someone's arrived, gives you the ability to communicate with the people inside of the car, as well as having the video capability to see if someone is actually in distress or if it's someone that's just a prank call. On the same panel as the push button, messages shall be displayed with permit emergency personnel to communicate with and obtain responses from trapped passengers, including the passenger who cannot verbally communicate or cannot hear. Why is this important? This provides additional support to the passengers who are speech and hearing impaired. A means to display a video to observe passengers at any location on the car floor to emergency personnel for entrapment, assessment shall be provided. Why is this important? A video feed into the cab provides the emergency personnel with additional information to better assess the situation. This includes verifying whether a passenger is unconscious, simply nonverbal, or perhaps the call is a false alarm, and there is no one in the elevator. And as you notice in this code, we were underneath of the section for cars under 60 foot of rise. This means this capability must be on site as well as the authorized personnel off site.
So summarizing the code slides, basically in addition to the legacy two-way audio that already exists in the elevator, there is need for the video to capture the entire cab floor. Obviously this is for detecting that somebody's in the elevator and just simply unable to communicate through any of the means, whether it's through the audio or the text messaging. They're unable to communicate with us, but we can see that there's somebody in there and get the necessary help. The text messaging display, pretty basic. In this scenario, the text messaging display is in the same display where the floor counter is, and the central station is able to send a message into the elevator, and the response back from the person in the elevator is a yes, no, and generally that's going to be, we'll repurpose the door open, door close buttons as yes, no buttons, and so they can respond in that fashion. There isn't a full keyboard in the elevator where they can give us detailed responses or anything like that. And then the other important piece is the status message change. They are aware from the display in words that the the communication has taken place, communications are connected, help is on the way. You know, some of the basic scenarios for us here from the EDC are, you know, it's very typical that we'll get an activation from an elevator and there's nobody there, just nobody's responding anyway. So quite typically people will hit the button either by mistake, or they did notice maybe the lights flickered, or there's a jolt or something. They hit the button, but they get to their floor and they're able to exit and are no longer in the elevator. With this system, we will be capable of knowing, having the assurance that the lack of communication is because there's actually nobody in the elevator. Maybe it's kids playing, but it also increases our ability to respond to events where we can't get responses either through two-way audio or through the text messaging. We can actually see the entirety of the elevator floor. So I think that'll be pretty helpful. This particular slide shows the progression of the code through the code years to include more and more capabilities and functions right up to the current functionality that we're talking about here today. So the solution for the customer basically revolves around obviously having the existing legacy emergency phone, the video and the video messaging system. Obviously, this is a different technology than just phone line technology or cellular technology, so that there is the need to have the firewall with encrypted communications, and the MAD solution does supply that, the encrypted communications. And then when we talk about the capabilities, all of the capabilities that we're discussing today, if there is 60 feet of rise in that elevator or more, everything that we can do from the EDC with the video and the text messaging and the status messages has to be available for the emergency personnel that arrive at the building to help the entrapped individual. Kings 3 has integrated the MAD elevator solution into our turnkey solution set. So we are prepared to handle these events here at the EDC at Kings 3, and MAD is prepared to provide the equipment.
This slide is more of a clarification of what we've been explaining over the past little bit. You're going to see a mock-up of the elevator itself. You're going to see the COP, the car operating panel. Then you're going to notice above on that car, you're going to have a car top box that's going to be the interface. You're going to have a camera that's going to give us the ability to have a video feed. When that goes over, it's going to communicate with the machine box in the elevator control room. The elevator will have the antenna that'll go out for the land. It'll go communicate with the lobby panel, as well as it will also have the communication from the emergency communication monitoring. So all of the items will be working together in concert to give the functionality of the code what we have been describing.
Okay, so the solution from the caller's perspective is pretty much as I outlined earlier. The passenger is going to become entrapped and press the button or the help button in the elevator. We're going to receive the call here at the EDC as we typically do. The operator is going to attempt to make audio communication with the person in the elevator, and failing that, if there's no response, then that's when we'll go to the video and visually confirm whether the elevator is occupied or unoccupied, and perhaps know the broad status of the person in the elevator if they're there. The passenger, if the passenger isn't able to respond audibly, then we will begin the text messaging phase, where we'll ask them questions. Typically, our first question at the EDC is there a medical emergency? Is usually our first question for that scenario. And they'll be able to answer that yes or no, and then we can ask a few other questions and move on. And if there is if there's nobody in the elevator, then we can go ahead and close out that call. The screen to the person in the elevator is this screen here. In this screen, you can see a couple of things. You can see the text messaging, the line of questioning that we can send to them. We can also see that we've repurposed the buttons for door open and door closed for yes and no responses. And in the green bar along the bottom is what the current status of the communications is that we've talked about earlier. So our solution from the emergency operator's perspective, the system monitors the button through a second contact. So we still have the legacy phone, and the video and the other new portions of the system are also on a second contact on the help button. So both systems are tripped at the same time. For the video portion and the text messaging portion, that's the portion that opens up the encrypted tunnel to the dispatch center so that we can see the video and send the text messaging. Obviously, the call comes in and we answer those calls on the audio side of things. When the operator needs to use the video, if there's no contact through the audio, then we will use the encrypted tunnel back to the elevator to be able to utilize the video. And obviously, if there's somebody in there and they can't respond audibly, then we will also use it for the two-way text messaging piece. So the training of the operators, what we're talking about is that there are some issues that may occur. At Kings 3, our EDC is a highly professional. This is what we do, is we respond to elevator emergencies. So all of our training is in that sphere. That's our specialty, and that's what we do. But typically, problems can arise when these calls are answered by untrained personnel, maybe answering service. They're not particularly used to handling specifically and only elevator emergency calls. So they may have a rougher time of doing that. And then obviously the installation and repair of this stuff is different than just an audio only phone or legacy phone from previous to this code. So that requires specialized support and training as well. The dispatch center, like we mentioned on the previous slide, over here at Kings 3, our emergency dispatch center is staffed by very highly trained personnel. This is what we do every day, all day, 24/7, 365. We do have the processes and procedures down very well, so everything's handled in a very consistent manner. All of our calls are recorded. So if there's any dispute about what happened in an elevator, we're quite capable of providing that information as part of the recording. The video part of this is also recorded. So anything that's on that screen is going to be recorded, and that is the text messaging is recorded. The status messages are recorded as they're sent out, and what we can see on the video is recorded as well. Over here at Kings 3, we are able to respond in multiple languages. We do have a service that we utilize that has 175 languages as their capability. I don't believe we've ever presented them with a language that they didn't understand. And of course, because this is what we do have a great deal of resilience. We do have redundant capabilities within our main facility, including dual redundant backup power for the entire emergency dispatch center. And then if we have a building denial scenario where we can't utilize this building for any reason whatsoever, we have an off-site location that can host the dispatch center as well. That is a live operation as well. It's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Personnel can go over there anytime without any need for us to commission the site or bring it up. It is up and it is running all the time. So that might be a little bit more than other people that aren't particularly specialized in this would have.
Common practice on the installation side, one emergency phone connected to one phone line dedicated to the elevator phone. Push the button and the phone works. The problem, industry practice is for that phone line to share with other emergency phones or equipment without regard to the impact these devices have on other emergency phone operations. The common practice on the phone line sharing the wrong way connected multiple phones to a single phone line. First, sacrifices reliable performance to perceived cost savings. Does not meet the intent of A17.1. Activating phones on a shared phone line can block other emergency calls, cause connected calls to be disconnected, prevent retrieval of ADA required location information. A single malfunctioning phone can disable all phones attached to a shared line. On this slide, you're going to see how the phone line common industry practice is set up. One single phone line coming in, and then being distributed to each individual elevator. The problem fails ASME and ADA because all phones will not work simultaneously. One phone off hook prevents remaining phones from operating properly, often blocking calls completely. Operator cannot call back into the individual elevators when multiple elevator phones are in use. Operator may not be able to play the location message. Line sharing the right way. The proper line sharing requires a consolidation unit, allowing multiple emergency phones to be shared in a single phone line while operating simultaneously. This solves the issue of blocked calls. Question to ask when using a consolidator. When will it work with the elevator equipment such as modems used in remote monitoring elevator performance? Does it have the ability to seize a non-emergency phone line for temporary use by emergency phones? Can a secondary line be connected as backup should the primary line fail? Does the consolidator have a battery backup? Telephone line sharing, the ASME ADA code complying solution. Single phone line with a consolidated dialer. With a smart dialer, all phones consolidate to enable simultaneously two-way communication between each elevator cab and the monitoring station. As each phone is activated, it sends an identifying signal, allowing our operators to locate each caller as ADA requires. The test is easier with two testers. If only one, lock out one elevator. You do not need to take the elevators out of service during the test. Activate two elevators phones at approximately the same time. Each phone must be able to carry on a two-way conversation with the emergency operator. If only one call goes through, no calls go through. One call connects, but it disconnected when the second phone is activated. Phone will not dial out. Calls are completed, but parties cannot hear each other. Phones do not comply with ASME A17.1, test fails. Ask the operator to identify your location and cab number. ASME requires independent location identification from all communication connected phones without asking ask the caller. If the operator is unable to provide the identification, the test is failed. Call back into the elevator. If the rise is 60 feet, ASME requires that emergency personnel be able to call directly back into the elevator without intentional delay. Calls cannot be routed through a switchboard or auto attendant. Ask operator to call back in the elevators. If the phones cannot be called back directly, test failed. Failure exposes the building owner to unnecessary liability. Disconnect the dial tone from the feeding of the ADA emergency phone line. The device will detect the phone line is now inoperable. Depending on the manufacturer, there may be a delay to minimize temporary interruptions by the local phone company. Currently, ASME A17.1 and A17.3 allow the audible indicator to be silenced, but visual indicator must remain lit until dial tone is restored. This is a portion that will be on the outside of the hall call when you walk up to the elevator to press the button. Reconnecting the phone line should restore the device after a few seconds to its normal state with no audible or visual output. Failure exposes the building owner to unnecessary liability and risk. Phone line testing can identify the dead phone lines through failure to receive programmed automatic test calls. This provides an opportunity to repair the line before the phone line is needed through the elevator entrapment. Elevator communication must include two-way communication capability for those who are hearing and speech impaired, include video capability, and display message, not just a light to indicate help is on site if the elevator rises 60 feet or more. Do these rules apply to me? Would be the question. The code will only apply to elevators permitted for construction or modernization alteration after the code is adopted by the state where the elevator is located. It will not impact existing elevators which are not undergoing modernization. ASME does not enforce code. Individual states have adopted ASME as their standard and self-select their timeline for adoption. To find out the required state, what the requirement is for your state, go to the King Street link below.
All right. Thanks everybody for attending. This is our contact information here if you have any questions for us after the webinar, but we are ready at this point to go ahead and take questions from the attendees.